It's time to stitch the ice cream cart on our 2 scoops bench pillow. The ice cream cart is on page 28. I have all of the fabrics backed with fusible interfacing, and I have the batting. And I am going to be cutting these 2 pieces out with my ScanNCut. Now, the last video I did, I just used the fabric and the interfacing on the back, and then I used some glue to stick this to the block so that it wouldn't move when I was doing all of the decorative outlining. So this time I think I'm going to use an iron-on adhesive. And so I have the light Steam-A-Seam 2. It comes in several different packages. I get the light because this has no issue with sewing and it doesn't gum up your needle. So the only difference between these two is one has grids, and that's the piece that I happen to pull. You can see it just has some grids on it if you were to draw something. And the other package is the same product, only it has numbers, letters, and shapes, and so already like pre-printed on the back. So if you were wanting to do a name, you could use their print and just cut it out instead of having to trace something. Other than that, it is exactly the same product. And so this is paper backed. So once you peel the paper, it is very lightly sticky, and that's just temporary to, put it onto your fabric so that it won't, fall off until you iron it. Once you iron this on, it becomes permanent. And so I will put this on to my fabric, and I will iron the one side because it has two protective covers. One side you would stick to, for example, the back of this fabric, and so you can see how that doesn't, fall off. I would iron that, and then when I get ready to place it onto my block, once I've cut it out, the second piece of paper, it's kind of hard, then would come off, and then you would iron this to whatever project you're working on. And so this is a double-sided adhesive. So I am going to try that with my ScanNCut, and I'll see how it works out. So let's first go to the computer and get our files ready and sent to the ScanNCut, and then we can prepare our fabric. I'm on canvasworkspace.brother.com, and I will usually click on my projects just to kind of clean up my screen, and then this shows the projects that I have saved. I will select new, and I need to now bring in the SVG files for this project or for this block. So I will go to the SVG icon, choose file, and then I need to navigate to where I have those. Again, for me, I have a embroidery folder on my desktop for easy access, and then I'll just navigate to my Kimberbell, to my 2 scoops bench pillow, and then to the SVG electronic cutting file folder. So once I have that, I will just find the ice cream cart, and I will double click. You can also just click it once and then click open, and it's got that file chosen, and now I will just select OK, and it brings the 2 pieces for this file. I'm just going to leave these right now. Once I get my fabric prepared and put on my mat and scanned into my machine, I can move these to wherever those fabrics are. So now if I want to save this and have this under my projects, when I open Canvas Workspace, then I can come to this little icon. It kind of looks like a printer with an arrow, and it says overwrite this project with an S in parentheses, and that just means it's going to save it. So I will save that. It says saving is complete. Now the next time I come to Canvas Workspace and go to my projects, this will be a project listed. So now I need to get it to my machine. So I'm going to click the download button, And it's going to ask me, do I want to put this onto my computer? Because I can use a cord and connect my computer to my ScanNCut directly. I can save it to my computer and then add it to a USB and take that USB to the ScanNCut, or I can directly send it to my ScanNCut, and that's what I'm going to do. So I am going to use the ScanNCut transfer. I do have my machine turned on, and so I am just going to select transfer. And it says the ScanNCut transfer is ready. So now I can go to my machine. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare my fabric. So let's get that steam a seam pressed on, and then we can continue with cutting this out and see how it works. So I still have the paper on. I'm just going to roughly cut before I peel off the paper, because of course I want to save the rest of it. So now I can peel back one of the pieces of paper. It doesn't matter which one. This side came off easier, so I'll just peel that. I'll flip it over, make sure that there's no, threads or hairs or anything on the back. And I am just going to stick this to the back. Now I want to make sure that there is none hanging over, and there is a little bit, so I'm going to cut that off because I don't want that to get onto my mat. Remember, Kimberbell gives us plenty of fabric, and so it doesn't need to go, exactly to the edges. You can see mine's a little bit short and inside, and that's what I want. So on this piece, looks pretty good. Again, I'll just take off whichever piece comes off easier. So now I just need to press this for about 20 seconds. So now that I've ironed this, I am going to leave the paper on, because if I were to peel this off, it does leave a little bit of that sticky, and I don't want that to be sticky when I put it through my ScanNCut. And so this is pretty thick, so I'm going to be interested to see how the ScanNCut does with this. And so I have both pieces ready, so let's go get these on the mat. So I've got, again, I'm going to use my standard tack mat. Although this might be better to use with the fabric mat, but I'm just going to use this. I am going to put the paper side down, which is one reason I don't want to use the fabric mat. That would probably stick and not be so good for my mat. So I am going to put fabric right side up, and I'm just going to place it. I kind of like to try to place things in different spots and not always up in the, same corner, so that the mat gets used. And I still should be okay peeling that paper off. So you can see the paper stuck here, but it peels off pretty easy. So I'm going to brayer that down, and then on this piece, I think I'm just going to put it down here. But because I am using my standard mat, I like to tape things, even though it's, you can see how well it's stuck down. I still like to tape. So I'm going to get some masking tape, and we'll tape this down. So I did take some of this tape off. It was overlapping these, and I think these all marks need to be clear when it scans it. So that's why I just cut that little piece in half. So I'm going to put my mat against these two little ledges and push it against the roller. And I have my machine on, so I will just touch the screen. And so the first thing I need to do is hit this grid button on the side, and that's just going to load my mat. And so it will just scan it in just a few inches. And now we're ready to go get our pattern. So I need to go to retrieve data and go to the cloud. That's how I sent mine. However, if you put it on the USB, you would choose this one. If your computer is directly hooked up, you would choose this one. So I will select that. And here are my two little pieces that I sent over. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is slightly enlarge these designs. With the Kimberbell, I find that if I just increase the size just a tiny bit, it works out a little bit better. So the first thing I'm going to do is select Edit, then Object Edit, and then I'm going to choose this first icon, this little box with the arrow. And this is already selected, this bottom part of the cart. And so I am just going to increase 2 clicks, and it will increase both the height and the width. You can select this button if you just want the height or just want the width increased. However, of course, I want the whole SVG enlarged. So now I will select the top of the cart and increase 2 notches. And then that's all I have for this. So I will select OK, OK again, and OK. So now that I have those sized, I need to scan in my mat so I know where my material is on the screen to be able to move these 2 pieces. So I am going to choose this little button in the middle right under Edit and hit Start. And it is going to scan my whole mat. So now you can see the 2 pieces of fabric, and I am going to move these over. So the top of the cart is this little scalloped piece, and that goes on the striped fabric. So I will move it over with my little stylus. You can use your finger, but you know, sometimes that's a little bit hard to see. Now, whether you do your finger or the stylus at this point, they're kind of bigger movements. And if I needed to get this a little bit more accurate, I can come to Edit and then choose these little 4 arrows. And then these arrows I can use to go up, you know, little tiny movements, go to the left. And this is a little bit more precise. And so if you want to, you know, use, again, your finger or the stylus to get it in the general position, then you can use these arrows to get it exactly where you want it. And so then if I want to move this one, I can do the same thing. I can select it and then just move these exactly where I need to. So once I'm happy with where they're positioned, then I will select OK, OK again, and then OK once more. And now it's going to ask what I want to do. I will select, and I want to cut, but you of course would choose whatever you're doing. There's more options if you use these arrows to go down, but I want to cut. And because I'm cutting fabric, I want to make sure that the half cut is off. The half cut is when you're cutting something like adhesive vinyl or HTV vinyl that has either the clear carrier sheet or the paper backing. You would only want to cut the vinyl and not cut all the way through. But of course, I'm cutting fabric, so I want to cut the entire piece. Now, before I start, I am going to put my rotary blade. I'm going to try that again. And so I have my regular, just the regular blade in. That's this black one. So I'm going to lift this up and pull this blade out. And then I will put this blade in and shut this little lever. And then I can hit start. So what it's going to do, the blade will test the depth of the mat by pressing the blade, down and seeing where the mat is, and then it will come to the piece of fabric and do the same thing so it knows how thick the fabric is. So let's see how this cuts with this steam-a-seam. So I'm going to hit start. So the first thing I want to do before unloading my mat is to make sure it cut all the way through. And so if I had the fabric mat and it was super sticky, I would use my little scraper to go underneath, which I still use sometimes when I use a standard mat. But let's see if this cuts. So I'm just going to use my little seam ripper and kind of go under where it's cut, and we'll see if things cut. Now, I have fusible interfacing plus the steam-a-seam, and so and a standard mat, and so I can lift up and pull this piece back. However, if I only had fabric and it wasn't backed with anything, I would want to use the scraper because I wouldn't want to stretch the fabric. So now I can see when I'm pulling this back that it's cutting. It looks like it's cutting well. I'm not sure if you can see that. You can see the paper still on the mat, and so I am not sure it actually cut. Oh, yep, it did. So I'm gonna attach that because this is sticky and I want to leave the paper backing on if all possible until I'm ready to, put it onto my block. So I will attach that, and that looks like it cut out great. So here's the piece. I've got the seam-a-seam, you can see the grid, and so the paper comes off super easy, but this is slightly tacky. So now when I go to do my block, I can put this down, not have to use the glue basting, and then I can iron this so it will stick. So let's see, make sure this next piece cut. Again, it comes off super easy, but the paper's still down, so let me see if the paper cut. Yep, so there's the paper. And that's just sticking really well because, of course, it's paper and it's sticking to the mat. And so that looks like it cut great too. I'm very happy with that. I think I might be using that a lot instead of the glue basting, but we'll see how it works. Okay, I dropped the paper and I didn't pull it all the way off. So let me get this. So here's the paper. And I'll just put the back, and again, that just protects until I'm ready to put it onto my block. So that cut well with the backing. You could also, again, use Heat and Bond light. You would have to use the light in order to stitch on your machine. All right, so now that I know that they cut and I'm done, then I will go ahead and hit this button, this little grid button on the actual little display, and that will unload my mat. And now I can just take this off. I usually save my tape and use it several times. And so I'll take that off, put it aside, and then just get ready to start my block. I'll go to Embroidery and to my USB. And I did not combine these files in software, so I will bring in the background quilting. I will open the quilting bundle, and this uses lines 5, and I need the 6x8. I'll hit set. I will go to add, back to my USB, and to my embroidery files folder, and I need to bring in the cart. And I will hit set. Now, although this looks like it would fit the block, this block is horizontal, and so the cart is the last design that I brought in, and so it is selected. So I need to come to edit and rotate, and it really doesn't matter which way you rotate it because it would be the same. I'm going to rotate it to the left 90 degrees so that it fits the block horizontal. I will select OK, and that still keeps things centered. I am going to go to embroidery, and now that I've chosen embroidery, it combines those into one file. So now I am going to move my design down. I'm going to put my hoop, the last hoop I used was 5x7. I have my 7x12, and in my machine I don't have a 7x12, so I need to choose the 8x12. Select OK, and now I can go to layout and move. I'm going to move it all the way down because I have all of my stabilizer, which is my muslin, hooped in a long strip towards the back of my hoop or the top of the hoop. And then because my machine is set for an 8x12, but I have a thinner hoop, I always bump it over to the left. It's just a little bit, but it helps compensate for the fact that I have a thinner hoop than my machine thinks. So I will select OK, and I always go to this minus plus needle, and it will start by stitching the placement for the batting. So I've placed the batting and the fabric, and now I need to come skip a few steps. Again, these are totally optional to skip. You can run all 5 steps of the background quilting. So I cut my batting to size, and so the next step is tacking the batting down. If you cut your batting larger, you would tack it down and then trim it. Since my batting is cut to size, this really wouldn't do anything, so I'm going to use the down arrow to skip. The next step is the placement for the fabric, and that is just 1/4 of an inch past the batting, and our fabric is cut much larger. So that is a step that I will skip. And now I'm going to tack down the fabric and then run the quilting. Ran the placement for the awning, and so now I'm going to start using my little 2 pieces that I cut with the ScanNCut. So I'm going to take the paper off. Again, it's very slightly sticky, and I am going to line up with this placement line, and because I enlarged it, I need to make sure that it's all covered and as evenly as I can. And I think that looks good. And it does stick a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is lightly press, and that steam seam will of course tack down and hold that. Now the next step is to tack that fabric down, and I am going to skip this because I've already cut my piece with the ScanNCut. Of course, if you are not using the ScanNCut, you would have a rectangle of fabric, you would tack it down and then trim. So I am going to use my down arrow to skip, and then it's going to do the placement for the bottom part of the cart. And then we'll do the same thing. I will take the backing off, I will place that within those placement lines and press. So the next step would be to tack that piece down, and so I'm going to skip that, and now it's going to do the satin stitch for the awning. Oh my gosh, this is such a cute block. And I did want to mention two things. I think that the satin outlining for this top piece was supposed to be this little bit lighter, kind of mauvier pink. It is kind of hard to tell with the little square that they give you in the directions. However, I wanted this to show up more, and so I chose to use the brighter pink. And then I also forgot to mention at the beginning that this little cart will have these 3 little ice cream cones from the embellishment kit that will sit right on top of this cute little stand, so it looks like they're selling little ice cream cones. All right, so this is a background quilting that goes into the seam allowance, and so I am not going to be trimming the muslin because no matter what I do, there will be a little bit into the seam allowance. So I will leave this basting stitch in and kind of use it as a guide for my pop rulers to cut. So let's get this cut to size.